I'm Shahar Azani, and I'm pleased to join once more David Harris on Defending Israel. It's been 3 months since that horrid day of massacre in Israel, and the IDF, as we're hearing, is already changing positions vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip and the continuous fighting against Hamas. In the meantime, we're hearing about the International Court in The Hague discussing Israel as more and more testimonies are coming out of brutal sexual violence against the Israeli hostages still held by this sadistic terror organization, Hamas. David, as we get into our conversation, I really want to start from the bird's eye view of the strategic outlook of where we are at the moment. We're hearing news about continuous Iranian support for these Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Just the other day, the report came out about Islamic Jihad terrorists getting training in Iran on sniping, which allows them to get additional salary as they are part of this horrendous terrorist organization. Are we not dealing with the issue at hand, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran?
It seems to me, and obviously I don't have all the information, that we're avoiding the main issue. In a way, by avoiding it, we're somehow hoping that it will magically vanish. But all roads lead to Tehran, Shahar. It's inescapable. Hamas without Iran would be a vastly diminished organization without the weaponry, without the training. Hezbollah in Lebanon, which also continues to threaten Israel, occasionally fire salvos of missiles, loom large, is a creature of Iran. And now the Houthis, the third H in what we can call the triple H. Right. The Houthis. Where's the weaponry come from? Where's their training come from? Where's the funding come from? Where's the diplomatic cover coming from? So yes, this is very much about Iran, and yet, to follow Western political leaders in their discussions since October the 7th, many are bending over backwards, almost breaking their spine in order to avoid the central issue that, again, all roads lead to Tehran.
Do you see any resolution of this situation on any level without addressing the Iranian issue?
I don't because Iran will continue in various ways. And look, never underestimate your enemy. Iran is shrewd, Iran is clever, Iran is experienced, Iran plays the long game.
Right.
And their hatred for America, their hatred for Israel, their hatred for the West, their determination to dominate the Middle East, their resolve to upend the Abraham Accords and ensure that Israel and Saudi Arabia never sign an agreement, everything they're doing runs contrary to fundamental American, European, and Western interests.
Right.
And yet we continue to play this game, which we saw particularly during the 8 years of the Obama administration, joined by the British, the French, the Germans, and the European Union leadership of we can moderate the Iranian regime. In fact, there are reformist elements that we need to engage to overturn the extremists. We didn't outsmart them. They outsmarted us. They played us for the suckers we were. We had a very strong hand going in. We were a powerful consortium of nations. We had driven oil prices down. We had them on the ropes, and they turned it around, Shahar. Then we signed that weak, porous, shameful deal in 2015. And now, and I have much praise for the Biden administration relationship to Israel today, as I do for its support of Ukraine. But when it comes to Iran, you have veterans of the Obama administration who are still clinging to that legacy and hoping to revive it. And I think those days of revival are over.
You know, David, look at the path of destruction as a result of that appeasing approach vis-a-vis Iran. You're seeing the Iranian using all of their pawns across the board, like you said, from the Houthis to the militias in Iraq and Syria to Hezbollah to Hamas, and yet not an ounce of Iranian blood has been spilled, aside from some actions that may have been attributed to a certain country in the Middle East in which Iranian Revolutionary Guards officers have been hurt. But there is no doubt as to the adamance of the Iranian regime to pursue this kind of ideology. We've recently heard of attacks against the Houthis in Yemen by the Western coalition. Do you think that there might be, in spite of the lack of immediate intention to engage in a war with Iran, do you see this escalating, deteriorating, or evolving into an all-out war against this evil empire?
I think Iran is testing us, and not for the first time, and I'm sure not for the last time, Shahar. They're testing us. Look, they're not just using proxies to attack Israel. They're using proxies to attack America,
right,
and Britain, our ally. I read of attacks in Kurdistan against American interests, attacks in Syria against American interests, obviously in the Red Sea shipping lanes. They're testing us. And here I draw on history, because I think without an understanding of history, we're lost. Winston Churchill, who, to his everlasting credit, understood Hitler when too many others failed to understand him, actually called the Second World War, his words, not mine, the unnecessary war. His position was that had Britain and France stood up to Germany in 1933, 34, 35, 36, there may never have been the war in 1939. But instead, Britain and France averted their eyes, tried to pretend that Hitler was not who he said he was. The United States felt safe across an ocean, posing as a neutral nation. And the consequence, the Second World War, up to 60 million people killed in the Second World War. And of course, for the Jewish people, 2/3 of European Jewry annihilated. Are we to learn from history and the need for strength and deterrence? Or are we destined to ignore history and repeat it in various forms? Iran understands strength. And when the United States says publicly, we have no interest in escalation, we have no proof that Iran is involved in Hamas, we're not signaling virtue, we're signaling trembling knees. Iran is smart. Again, never underestimate your enemy. They're smart. They read us. They read between the lines. They interpret the body language, what's said and what's not said. And they see there's no appetite in America, there's no appetite in Europe for spine, for cojones,
right,
for backbone.
Right.
We need to change that, and soon.
And soon. And you know, the irony is, David, that the more, this approach stems from a desire for supposed peace and not to engage in war, and it's an open invitation for violence and confrontation. But you know, I was listening to you just now, David, about the way you phrased the statement about Iran and the West. And I can't help but hearing a horrible semblance to the way the Israeli government was looking at Hamas, from the desire to see something that's not there, from the lack of desire to engage in confrontation, for thinking to ourselves that we can appease that terrorist evil organization by funneling the money from Qatar and allowing them to manage their own affairs and to allow their Gazan workers to get into Israel, and the heavy price that we paid as a result of this action. And I want to ask you about lessons from this war. And I'm talking about, let's start with right here. Do you feel that our Jewish organizational world is fighting the October 6th war or October 7th? What has changed and what hasn't in the way our Jewish world is managing this terrible emergency for Israel and for world Jewry?
So one comment first on the first part of what
right,
you said before we leave Iran. The Hebrew word for what you're talking about was conceptia.
Right.
There was a conceptia, an idea, a concept in 1973, as we know, from Moshe Dayan as Minister of Defense,
Right.
and from the head of military intelligence, Amman, that Egypt would not attack Israel. And that conceptia was so deeply rooted that evidence to the contrary, including, as it turned out, from Gabal Abdel Nasser's son-in-law, was somehow minimized, rationalized, discarded.
Right.
Fast forward to October 7th, and a conceptia 50 years later, after Israel resolved that never again would it fall into the trap of a hard and fast conceptia. But as you said, it did, and it paid a heavy price. We have a conceptia in the United States and Europe about Iran, and we're not willing to deviate from it, even as the evidence mounts that Iran is playing games with us, Iran is deceiving us, bamboozling us, lying to us, cheating, go down the list. And yet, too many are clinging to this conceptia that actually Iran is a rational state, that Iran can be engaged, that there's a tug of war between the liberals and the conservatives within the regime. Just go down the list of this conceptia. And yet, Iran attacks our assets in Erbil. Iran proxies are shooting at American ships in the Red Sea and disrupting supply chains and forcing up prices, by the way, as some ships have to go around the tip of Africa. Go down the list. We have to get out of the conceptia, whether in Israel or the United States. And by the way, what that means, and I've seen it in Jewish organizations in my own life, you need contrarians. Whether you're President of the United States or Prime Minister of Israel or CEO of an organization, you need to invite and encourage contrarians who challenge existing assumptions, always constructively, always respectfully, but you don't want a herd mentality. You ask about Jewish organizations. We all say that everything has changed on October 7th. The world will never be the same. It's true, but I'm not sure that many Jewish organizations have internalized that. It's not easy, because it can mean a kind of review from top to bottom of everything that currently exists, of how staff are deployed, of how resources are allocated, of what donors want from you. I know this from the inside.
Right.
So turning these ships around is not something simple, Shahar. But if we're serious about October 7th and
Yes,
thereafter,
if we're serious,
look, if organizations don't deal with DEI and the implications of DEI on thousands of American campuses,
right.
We've seen the consequences of the politicization and the weaponization of DEI in too many places. Harvard University witnessed within 24 hours 34 student organizations that blamed Israel publicly for October the 7th.
And immediately, shortly after that, they didn't even wait.
So this whole space, and what this means, the ethnic studies programs, the DEI, the attempt to turn universities from searching for the truth to preaching the truth.
But David, the problem you're mentioning about DEI, this is an American problem.
I'm
First
saying.
and foremost, it's not just a Jewish problem.
But my question is, where are Jewish organizations within this?
Right.
So I've seen, for example, some Jewish organizations still knocking on the DEI, intersectional, ethnic studies door, begging to be allowed in. What they haven't understood, I'm sorry to say, is they're not welcome. And if they're going to be allowed in, they're going to pay a much heavier price than they think. Because the Jewish organizations that you and I know before October 7th, that thought they could be part of that woke crowd, that intersectional crowd, and yet keep their Zionism, had a rude awakening, Shahar, didn't they?
Very much so.
They were told, we don't care about the other 99% you're with us on A, B, C, D, and E. Renounce your Zionism.
Zionism, renounce your values. Rape victims.
Denounce Israel. Don't just renounce it.
Very true.
Denounce Israel.
Right.
Separate yourself. Redefine Judaism in such a way that you have nothing to do with the land, the peoplehood, the connection. Nothing.
Nothing. But where have we seen this more than in the case of the women? When you saw no voice coming out of all of these woke communities and Me Too.
So I keep going. So the organizations that are not going to deal with the whole space of intergroup relations.
Right.
Many Jewish organizations, and I know this very, very personally, have devoted lots and lots of time and effort to becoming ethnic diplomats. And it was very logical. We want to be your friend. We support your basic values.
Right.
And in turn, we hope you'll be our friend when the crunch comes. Well, October 7th was the crunch.
Yes.
And we had lots of learning lessons, Shahar. Who was our friend and who was not? Not October 6th, October 7th. So how do we approach intergroup relations going forward, knowing that many of the partners we thought we had were either silent or complicit with our enemies? How about UNRWA? Can we just keep going pretending that this UN agency founded in 1950, which began with several 100,000 people on its list, presumably who would have died over time, reducing the list, is now over 6 million people who are in an ecosystem that actively supports the demonization, if not the destruction, of the state of Israel?
Perpetuation.
Can we simply look the other way while Western governments fund UNRWA mechanically, robotically? What about funding of American institutions by Middle Eastern countries, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Qatar in particular, as ISGAP, which I think is one of the most relevant organizations today,
right.
The Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. They've revealed the funding sources.
Right, we've seen that extensive report, quite shocking, and we see it how it undermines the foundations of U.S. society.
So what I'm saying, Shahar, I can keep going, but unless Jewish organizations, in my estimation, radically change their approach, and not just the substance, but the methodology, it's no longer just about dialogue and discussion. It's now about taking off the gloves. Lawfare. You know what? We have the law on our side.
Right.
Do Jewish organizations understand that? Go after these SOBs who call for genocide. Go after these SOBs who may violate hate crimes laws. Go after these SOBs who may trample on codes of conduct. Go after them in a way that they understand. And back to Iran, with strength, not weakness.
Right.
With strong backbone, not trembling knees. And we're still focused too much on wanting to be liked. Jews want to be liked. I get it. We all want to be liked. Be respected.
Right, be respected.
Find your self-respect.
Right.
People are walking the streets of New York calling for genocide against the Jewish people. People are walking the streets calling for the destruction of the one and only Jewish majority state. People are engaged in moral inversion and calling Israel a democratic country that is the epitome of anti-genocide, a genocide perpetrator.
Right.
This is happening before our eyes, Shahar. If Jewish organizations don't change their methodology, their strategy, and their tactics, they're going to be left behind, and new organizations are going to emerge which reflect this. We have dignity.
Right.
We have backbone. We're rolling up our sleeves. We're not pretending. We know who our friends are, and we honor and cherish them.
And we know who's not.
And we know who's not. It's pretty clear by now. That's what's been missing That's what's needed
Right.
desperately.
And that demand
And not
is not
tomorrow, now.
No. And that demand is not just coming from the, you're echoing the demand, the sentiment of the people. These are the sentiment you hear from Israelis, from American Jews. There is a desire to look at the world much more clearly. One of my favorite parts of our discussions every time is your demand that echoes in my head all the time about seeing who your friends are and who isn't. And it came to my mind this week when I saw the International Court in The Hague and looking into the proceedings against Israel and seeing Germany jumping to the foil and saying, we will stand by Israel, we want to join Israel's case. And at the same time, we saw the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan jumping to stand on the side of South Africa. I wanted to ask you, is there any update to your beautiful list of who's for us and who's against us when it comes to what you've been seeing in the last few weeks? Something that you can share with our viewers.
Look, the main countries that have stood with Israel and us, the Jewish people globally, are three: the United States, Germany, and Great Britain. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but people who ask for perfection are missing the boat. These three countries have stood against the tidal wave within their countries and beyond. And it's very much to the credit of the President of the United States, Joe Biden, to the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak, and to Chancellor Scholz of Germany. There have been a number of other countries. For example, as you and I meet, and I know this program will be aired in a few days, but the President of the Czech Republic is in Israel. I want to tell you that pound for pound, I know of no country in the world that today and yesterday, and I dare say tomorrow, has stood with the Jewish people in Israel more unambiguously, more proudly than the Czech Republic. And there are other countries as well, especially in Central Europe, Ukraine, Lithuania, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Cyprus. They've stood with us. In Latin America now, we have a new leader in Argentina who is getting a lot of attention because he's a fairly unorthodox leader. But when it comes to Israel and the Jews, he couldn't be clearer. A neighboring Uruguay, still strong, friendly, Paraguay, Ecuador, Guatemala, Costa Rica, in the Pacific Island nations, Palau and Nauru, many traditional friends of the Jewish people. So we have friends, never enough. And there's some people that are going to disappoint us. On the other hand, South Africa is not alone. But I'm saying to JBS viewers, unless you have a very compelling reason to go to South Africa, maybe close family, don't go.
Don't go.
Self-respect.
Self-respect.
Calling the International Court of Justice to file a claim of genocide, not against Hamas, but against a democratic nation whose only sin was the audacity to defend itself. South Africa, for me, will never be forgiven. Agreed. Turkey, not surprisingly, has joined with South Africa. And here, again, we play games with Turkey every so often. In Israel, in the United States, there's this kind of yearning for the old days when Turkey and Israel were friends and Turkey was a reliable NATO ally, and we're unwilling to see the reality, not of Turkey as a nation, but of its leader, its elected leader, Recep Erdogan, who has publicly accused Israel of genocide, who houses Hamas leadership, and who's become a lawyer for Hamas.
Right.
Again, self-respect. Chile.
I mean, self-respect. With Turkey, we were among the first to send the assistance for the earthquake.
I think you sent
remember?
The largest of any nation on earth. You sent the largest.
Right.
And I dial back a few years when there was the earthquake in Adapazari, and I still remember that Ehud Barak was Prime Minister of Israel. Israel and AJC, when I was the CEO, partnered. We rebuilt a town with prefabricated homes. AJC contributed to the school. Ehud Barak and I traveled to Adapazari with the Prime Minister of Turkey, a very big ceremony, the three of us, the Prime Minister of Turkey, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the CEO of AJC, standing together to support Turkey after the earthquake. And look what's happened.
But it goes back to what you said, because even at the time when we last sent the mission of Israeli rescue for the earthquake, there were reports coming out that the teams of the rescue were evacuating from some areas because they were under threat of attack in those very same regions, under threat of terror, under the threat of hostility from locals. So maybe, again, it goes back to your point, David, of us refusing to see the signs that are blaring right in front of our eyes.
And add just one more data point. In recent days, an Israeli soccer player who plays for one of the Turkish soccer teams dared to show on his wrist, when cameras caught it, support for the hostages.
Right.
He has now been deported from Turkey. I don't know whether he'll ever be able to return.
Then another player, yeah.
But the mindset that says, he's not saying destroy Hamas, bomb Gaza. He's reminding people that 100 days have passed and hostages are being held in sadistic, barbaric, bestial conditions by Hamas, which toys with videos and the psychology of this. You choose. What do you think? A, B, or C? Who's going to live? Who's going to die? And he had the audacity to show solidarity, and he had to leave Turkey. So open our eyes.
Right.
You know, it's not always easy. Many people have invested lots of years in lots of ideas, lots of concepcias. You know, business ideas in this country, friendship ideas in this country or with this group. October 7th changed it all, Shahar.
It did.
It changed it in the real world. It should change it in our world.
And when you say our world, David, I want to make sure that our viewers leave with the bottom line of your most important message today that I think should resonate not just with Jewish organizations, but with every individual who cares for justice and a change in this world. Stay focused, stay strong, and have self-respect.
And stay united.
Right.
We must be united. The stakes are too high for the Jewish people, and I would add, the stakes are too high for the Western world. And our job is not just to defend Israel, it's to wake up a sleeping Western world that doesn't understand who's coming after them. Because the big rallies in London and New York are not just about Israel. They're calling on the Houthis to destroy more American and British ships. They're calling for Sharia law. They're calling for jihad. Those are challenges to the Western democratic system. So Jews united and world wake up.
World wake up. One of the most important messages that I think all of us need to hear, especially at this moment, to have that patience and strength as we keep on fighting these forces of evil that truly threaten the foundations of our Western world and democratic values. I can't thank you enough for your clarion voice and for standing so strong and echoing a message that is relevant for us all, David. Thank you for sharing with us that wisdom and that worldview that is so needed these days.
It's I who thank you, Shahar.
And to all of you, our viewers, we'll say that these are indeed trying times for us all, and the only way we get through this, as we always say, is together. May we see better times soon, and as we always end, David, Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you very much for watching.